but she was fighting for women's rights well before the suffragettes became known, and she doesn't really get any credit for it.
Hi, I'm Justine.
And I'm Daryl.
And we're the Breakaway Bravehearts.
And today we are in Manchester on a tourism activity with an important difference. We're taking a walking tour of the city's alleyways and alehouses under the competent wing of Andy, our Invisible Cities tour guide.
So we'll head down here.
All the guides of Invisible Cities have experienced a sense of invisibility themselves. They've all experienced homelessness and then been retrained as guides to show us a part of the city that we wouldn't normally see. For Andy, that means showing us Manchester's pubs.
So we're just going under here, just watch for spillages on the floor, just in case.
And giving us insight into the city's darker patches of history, while he weaves us through the busy streets and colourful alleyways.
These shortcuts come in very handy. Although they can be quite colourful sometimes.
Andy's lives of up and downs seem to have brought him in full circle. His first ever job introduced him to pubs in Manchester, and now he uses the knowledge to create a tour that teaches others.
It's funny because my first ever job when I left school was a driver's mate delivering beer and soft drinks. So I automatically found out where loads of pubs were. Yeah. And I've just found my way by pubs. When people used to stop and say, where's such and such a place? Is it near a pub? Yeah, round there.
Manchester's pubs have been at the heart of the city's vibrant culture and social development throughout its history.
So this location, these buildings, is the location of the world famous Hacienda Nightclub. Built by Mr. Tony Wilson, Mr. Manchester himself, as they like to be known. Home to the Manchester music scene and Factory Records, responsible for the biggest selling 12-inch single of all time, Blue Monday by New Order. I never went in myself, my friends kept trying to drag me in, but it wasn't my scene. I'm daft enough after a beer, I don't need drugs. Unfortunately, because of the scene with the drugs, groups from Moss Side and Cheetham Hill tried to take over, and there was a number of shootings, so the police forced it to close down. So I like to tell my friends I literally dodged a bullet by not going in there. There's a history of historical events on what people have vandalised recently. As you can see, the Smiths, 1983. When you can see them, they go all the way down to the bottom. Madonna did her first British performance in there. She mimed to the B-side of Holiday. Bet she remembers that well.
As we followed Andy negotiating the noise and traffic, he told us of the unsung heroes, the lesser known and the less attractive aspects of Manchester's streets.
So here we are at Sam's Chop House. I brought it into my tour because it ties with my next stop, and it's a little bit of history, and it's starting to rain. Now, in the mid-1800s, chop houses became all the rage. There were places where gentlemen only could eat, drink and revel and get up to no good. And in 1865, brothers Thomas and Samuel Studd moved from London to Manchester to open up their own chop house. Thomas was a trained chef, and he met his wife-to-be Sarah, who was working as a waitress in a cocktail bar. It doesn't get any better than that, guys, it doesn't. I can't resist it though. I sing it sometimes, and they were all quite ambitious, and there was a massive argument between the brothers, and Thomas and Sarah promptly left to open up their own chop house, which is my next stop. Left Sam on his own.
Inside Sam's, you'll find one of his most famous patrons, our first streetwise hero of Manchester. L.S. Lowry grew up right in the thick of Manchester's industrial suburbs. He recreated those gritty streets and everyday scenes, bringing to life the essence of Manchester, with his portraits and urban landscapes that depicted what he saw surrounding him, circles of low wages and low expectations. Did you know that Lowry holds the record for rejecting British honours? He turned down 5, including a knighthood. He was known as a mischievous and secretive man who enjoyed stories regardless of the truth. Sam's was his go-to pub in Manchester, where he could observe and enjoy city life.
The staff didn't know where he was. They only knew he was a retired rent collector who worked in an office around here somewhere. So he'd sit at the bar with half a Wilson's Best or a glass of sherry, and he'd doodle on napkins and pass these off as tips to staff. So somebody somewhere's got a shoebox full of undiscovered Lowry doodles, or else they've all been binned. And I keep asking the owner where some of these staff live, but he won't tell me.
So a few alleyways further along, we learnt of another Manchester hero. With no statue and no honours,
So here we are at Brother of Sam, Mr Thomas's chop house. It's one of Manchester's first cast iron frame buildings, and the interior is completely intact from when it opened, so it's proper old in Manchester. Unfortunately, 4 years after opening the place, Thomas became quite ill, which meant that Sarah had to run the place. Now, bearing in mind that these were men only, and the women weren't allowed in the city centre and escorted at the time, one of the first things Sarah did was establish a private ladies' room in here. I believe it was on the first floor. It didn't go down very well, but she was fighting for women's rights well before the suffragettes became known, and she doesn't really get any credit for it. And she said it was a place where a woman could eat, drink and chat in safety, while the husbands were going up to whatever they were doing downstairs. Now, 4 years after that, at the age of 45, Thomas died, which meant as well as look after this place, she had to look after 8 kids. So he might have been ill, but he was busy. And at its peak, it had sold 400 meals a day, so you can imagine with the shape of it, it must have been mental. Now, a woman was allowed to take over her husband's business when he died, but she wasn't allowed to take any professional credit for it. So the name remained Mr Thomas's. But Sarah managed to get women jobs in all the chop houses and subsequently in other areas as well. So again, that was something what nobody else was doing. So she was a real pioneer. But in celebration of International Women's Day in 2019, they changed the name to Mrs Sarah's Chop House, which again caused a bit of a kerfuffle, with myself included. And then I found out why. You only think, fair cop, sorry Sarah. But 12 months later, they changed the front end back to Mr Thomas's and the back end to Mrs Sarah's. Or Mrs Sarah's rear end, as I like to say, because that's my warped sense of humour. So unfortunately, the sign with Mrs Sarah's, it's all fallen off, which is a shame really. Yeah, they had it in the window, but that seems to have gone as well.
Of course, Sarah wasn't the only pioneer of women's rights to come from Manchester. In the generation that succeeded her, Emmeline Pankhurst was born, who, while criticised at the time for her so-called militant tactics, is now rightfully celebrated as the leader of the British suffragette movement, which won women the right to vote in 1918. Sadly, Sarah didn't live long enough to see this outcome, but she would have seen the street rallies Emily organised in her days of the movement, and no doubt heard the conversations in her chop house.
Sarah was the first publican in Manchester, but by no means the last.
This place itself was built in 1820. It opened as a pub in 1830. It's home to the oldest available bare football table that dates back from 1955. But it's also home to the longest serving landlady. In January 2021, the wonderful, formidable Nancy celebrated 50 years in charge of the Peterloo of the Peak, and there's Nancy. She still runs the place with her son Marie. She lives in the flat upstairs. She featured on national news. Grade 2 listed, but developers are after it.
Indeed, construction and development in Manchester is a constant issue for Andy. Not just because it makes his job more difficult, but because he is losing buildings that have been a part of his life for decades.
It's grade 2 listed, but some half-wit has given the guy who's building these tower blocks permission to build luxury apartments right on the side of it. Now that building is going to go right around the back and literally block the windows and door off, and it's so sad. There is a campaign to save the place, so please scan and save the pub. It's just noise, 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 man. How's a man supposed to work?
Manchester is a place of movement, and the continuous rebuilding and change is not without its victims. As we walked together, Andy shared his stories and his views on homelessness, which he has seen on the rise.
I mean, even in Wigan now, it's growing. Yeah, if you walk through it in the evening, you see people in shop doorways, which you never saw. Yeah, but it will do. I mean, universal credit's causing a lot of it. The government's right to buy scheme in the 80s cut a lot of social housing because obviously people bought the houses cheap and they didn't replace them. So that got rid of an awful lot of social housing. Then they introduced the bedroom tax, which when you've got somebody in a 3-bedroom house, it's all well and good having a go at them, but they need to build 1-bedroom places for them to move into, which they didn't. So that put a lot of people in debt. Then they introduced universal credit, which with 0-hour contract and agency work doesn't work at all. And they say there's a shortage in employment because of lack of immigration. Nothing to do with that. People can't do it because if you do a job, they take half your money off you. So it doesn't, actually it's more than half of it. So it makes it impractical to do it. You're working for less than minimum wage, technically, and they'll try and talk you around it. And then there's universal credit rent cap, which in Wigan up until this year was £350. So if you can buy a place for £350 a month, good luck to you. Mine, when I first moved in, mine was 325, so I was okay. But then it went up to 400, and then it went up to 450. So I was £100 out of it. So it puts people in debt. It went up this year for the first time since 2013, I think. And I don't know how much it's gone up to, but it's still not covering your whole rent. So that's putting people, because obviously if you don't pay your rent, you've not a leg to stand on, and it's putting people in serious debt. And they need to do something about universal credit, to be honest, because it's just a disaster. So we had a group on my tour a couple of months ago, and they work for like homeless, and it's an homeless organisation. Yeah. And they said they was in one of the penthouses of the new tower blocks, and they asked the guy, how much does this cost to rent? And it's £8 a month. Yeah. They said, who the hell can afford that? They build them for footballers because they're only on short-term contracts. If they're only here for 6 months, it pays for the rest of the year. So most of these buildings are empty most of the time. And it's wrong, because they're demolishing social housing and replacing it with affordable housing. And it's not the same thing. The lack of social housing is the main issue. So it's just the wrong system. It's so hard, and unless you start building more places and making more places available, it's just going to get worse and worse and worse. I don't know, I wish I could put a finger on what the problem is, but I mean, if I hadn't been able to get that flat where I've got, I'd have been knackered. I'd have probably either been dead or else in prison. I'd have had no choice. What do you do? It's not easy, is it? There's no simple solution to it, which there should be, but you build more houses, will it ever be enough? Probably not. Now this has been derelict for a long time, as you can probably tell, and there has been a homeless group trying to buy the place to use as a homeless shelter centre. Right? Yeah. For a long time, and the council have basically been saying, well, we're waiting for offers, blah, 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 blah. Yeah. And it's now been sold to a Chinese consortium to build student accommodation. Surprise. They're going to keep the facade, but they're going to build a big tower, and the logic of it is it's going to be rent to buy. So there's going to be, don't know how many flats, and in a couple of years there's going to be no flats. So that's something else that's going to go to foreign investors, and the rent's going to go jump. Absolutely mad. And it's a shame, because that's a perfect place for homeless people. It's in the city centre, but it's out of the way. Yeah, absolutely. I'm surprised at Andy Burnham for allowing that, because he does a lot for homeless charities. But as I've said to people, he's tied by what he's allowed to do he's not boss of Manchester, he's just the mayor of Manchester. Yeah. But he gives half of his wages to homeless people. Is that right? Yeah. And he's got a charity what's got 600 people into secure accommodation off the streets. It's not permanent, but it's secure, and you can get an address to work from. Oh, wow. I was at his charity, he had his first annual charity dinner last year. And there's loads and loads of business people there, raising loads and loads of money, and he does an awful lot, so I'm surprised he's allowed that to happen.
After a destructive divorce which cut off his ability to support himself financially, Andy spent a few rough nights on the street, then housed himself for a time in a friend's garage. Andy got himself out of his situation by asking for help and making the most of every opportunity he could find. So he took up volunteering in a bookshop and a museum as a way to rebuild his skills and his confidence. So now he is in the position to be able to help others and pass on his mindset that has moved him away from this negative spiral.
Back on track showed me that there is help there if you want it. And that was a big eye-opener for me, because I went with I'm quite a quiet chap, believe it or not. If I don't know anybody, I'm pretty quiet.
And now you're touring strangers. Love it.
Yeah. But I was very angry at the time because of what was going on with the ex-wife, what was going on because he was trying to get me in serious trouble. Yeah. And I knew if I didn't have the help I had, but it's only because I asked.
Something made you ask that?
Yeah. Well, yeah, I've got to. I had nothing to lose. And it was back on track. because every Friday, every now and again, the Volunteers Centre for Manchester is on the ground, the floor underneath, and they got people in talking. And I thought I could only sit and be angry long enough. I'm not helping anybody. And I found a place in Wigan to volunteer. And I ended up going to Africa because of that. I'd never been abroad before, and I thought, well, why the hell not? 10 days in Ghana, what an eye-opener that was. Because I'd done that, I thought I'll do the museum, and it just got me talking to people. And you've got to do it when you're ready. You know, don't sit there being bitter and nasty and spiteful. It gets you nowhere. And ask. And if you, I said I did a talk at Back on Track last year, and I said, if you're on your arse and you've got nothing to lose and somebody offers you a chance to do something, have a go. Because at least you can say, I've had a go and I don't like it. And volunteering is not it's not being stuck in a musty old shop with a bunch of old biddies anymore. There's all sorts, especially in Manchester, there's all sorts of things to get involved with.
Back on Track, Streetwise Opera and Invisible Cities are just a few of the organisations that support those experiencing homelessness to help make positive changes to their lives. We've popped a link in the description below if you'd like to learn more or make a donation to any of these organisations.
Manchester has been a place of social movement throughout its history. It's even been recognised by Abraham Lincoln, who wrote a letter thanking them for boycotting slave-produced goods. At the time, Manchester was a huge player in the cotton industry, but civil war in America had caused a cotton famine, which led to a lot of unemployment and tough times for Manchester's workers.
It's a very wordy letter is all I can say, and I'm glad we don't communicate like that anymore.
Despite the hardship, the people of Manchester took a strong stand against slavery. In 1862, they gathered at the Free Trade Hall and passed a resolution supporting Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation, which aimed to free slaves in the Confederate States. This was a bold move, considering it made their own situation even worse. Lincoln's letter thanked them for their courage and moral stance, recognizing that they were willing to endure serious struggles to support the fight against slavery. While this is one example of Britain's fight for right, we found out there's a darker, lesser-known history around England's involvement in the slave economy. We found out more on a recent trip to Bristol, so subscribe and hit the notifications bell to make sure you get into that video too.
Another uncomfortable truth involving Manchester's working class and their supposed protectors is the tragedy of Peterloo, and it too is linked to the city's alehouses.
So the little pub, the Ralph Abercrombie, is named after Sir Ralph Abercrombie. What his connection to Manchester is, I haven't the foggiest idea. However, it's important for being a real survivor from what became known as the Peterloo Massacre, which is an infamous day in Manchester's history, where on August the 16th, 1819, it's estimated between 60,000 and 80,000 people gathered in St Peter's Field, which we'll be passing in a bit, to listen to a guy called Henry Hunt come and talk about changing the corn laws and reforming the voting system. Because at the time there were only 3 people allowed to vote for Manchester, and the government had banned the import of cheap corn, and the rich people were keeping the good stuff and giving working class people corn what was mixed with gravel and grit and all sorts of rubbish. Now word got out that Henry Hunt was coming, so families put on the best clothing, they picked picnic baskets and lunch baskets, and they walked from as far as Yorkshire, Cheshire, the Potteries, all over Manchester to gather in St Peter's Field. The magistrates were watching proceedings from houses overlooking the field. They took exception to the fact that there were women present at what they dubbed an illegal rally anyway. So when Henry Hunt turned up and there was a big kerfuffle, they claimed that they feared an uprising because in France they were killing rich people and executing them, so that's what they said they feared. So they alerted the yeomanry, a lot of which are in the pub, getting extremely drunk because the police station was right next door. This is where the horses were stabled. So the yeomanry got on the horses, trotted into the field, and then for reasons nobody will know apart from spite, they promptly started hacking and slashing at the public with the sabres. Originally they were attacking the women. The men who got injured first were trying to protect the women, and then it just turned into a full-scale riot. The soldiers tried to defend their actions by saying we only use the flats of our blades, but it's inexcusable anyway, and they were using table legs and anything they could get their hands on. There's a picture of Henry Hunt trying to calm people down, unsuccessfully. The government blamed the public said it was completely unprovoked. The death toll stands at 18. The first person to be recorded to die was a 3-year-old boy who was crushed in his mother's hands by a horse. Injuries range from 400 to 800. There's plaques on the wall. There's one just over there, a red one, what says 400. A couple of buildings down it says 8. The reason being, if you reported injuries at a hospital, you promptly got put in prison. So people didn't report cuts and bruises and died later of infections and internal injuries. There were multiple miscarriages. The government denied all acceptability and brushed it under the carpet, which is generally what they do. A reporter spoke to a guy who'd just come back from the Napoleonic Wars, who said that's worse than anything he ever saw at Waterloo, and it promptly became dubbed Peterloo. Ralph Abercrombie was the place where the bodies were stored after Peterloo because it had a big ice-free cellar and it was right near the police station. The government did actually come out and say it was unprovoked, it was our fault, which is a bit late in the day. Bizarrely, the people who caused the injuries actually got reward for trauma. It says everything you need to know about those times. So here we are at the Britain's Protection, one of Manchester's oldest pubs. It's also where they got treatment after Peterloo for injuries because they knew they weren't going to get persecuted for it. So the wall here is also a survivor from Peterloo. It's where people got crushed by horses against. These flowers on the floor, the ones with the red circles on, have the names of people who died at Peterloo written on them. Some genius thought a solar-powered thing would be a good idea in Manchester. However, Murray Hayes always lights up, bless her socks, and they do actually light up slowly but surely as the night draws in. The computers at the sides did have information about Peterloo on them, but as you can see, they no longer work, which is a real shame. But there are 18 names on here. But this one always lights up, which is quite nice. In 2019, it became the 200th anniversary. People started talking about it again. I became an ambassador thanks to Streetwise Opera. So I found out loads of shortcuts and loads of information. And I got my badge. And there were events going on all year, concerts and all sorts of bad things, and I became a steward at things. It's now on the school curriculum, and it was the anniversary on Friday. And there was flowers on there the other day. Hopefully they're still there. So this is a monument to Peterloo, which was opened on the 200th anniversary, August the 16th, 2019. It's got the names of people who died, the areas they walk from, although they've not put wigging on it, which I'm a bit annoyed about. Caused a bit of controversy when it opened because disabled people complained they couldn't get to the top. On top there is a compass pointing to historical protests around the history, around the world where people have been killed. The artist, being a bit of an arse, said you can see it from the ramp, which you can, but you can't read it. And after loads and loads of warranted abuse, he recreated it on the floor at the side. You're more than welcome to go and have a look on top. And they've recently re-cleaned it just in time for the anniversary, which is nice. The flowers are still here, which is nice to see. It's nice to see the bouquets still up there.
I love the way Andy talked about Peterloo. He just seemed to want to make it personal, as if he really connect to the event. To prepare for his tour, he spent a lot of time researching online and then talked to people to get the human story.
I was ready. I knew my route. It was just a case of finding things out. I found things out, what people have told me, and then I just listened to everybody.
His time on the streets has taught him about people with all their imperfections and deficiencies. He has developed a way of looking at the world that is compassionate while realistic.
I mean, I saw some of the things what was going on when I was homeless, and if I told you, it'd be a better book than Lord of the Rings, honestly. If I could put it all in writing, it'd be I couldn't make it up. Some people want help, some people don't. There were a lot of people there who were coming in extremely drunk, and they were getting food bags and selling them. And it's very hard. It just blackens the whole thing, doesn't it? There's people who need help. And I actually felt guilty about going in and having my dinner. And it was a nice place, but they're too soft, I think, sometimes. They need to say, you can't know. Because you need to promote people to get better, don't you? You can't just let them carry on.
We asked him about the best way to support those experiencing homelessness, and his advice was to point them in the direction of organisations that can help them help themselves.
There's a lot of places in Manchester what do help. You get vans going out and giving food out to them, and there are a lot of centres where you can go. I mean, Back on Track have started giving breakfasts out to people who are homeless recently, and they have cheap food. But in Manchester, especially from my perspective, there are a lot of places where you can get help. There's Back on Track, there's a Booth Centre, there's the Mustard Tree, and you can go and do crafts and learn a few skills and courses. and they get you on the housing system and they get you on the voting system. It's just be persistent. Don't just give up, I think, is the best, you know.
In particular, along with Invisible Cities, Andy has benefited from the experience and the confidence that he's gained through his time with Streetwise Opera.
Mm-hmm.
He has found himself singing in front of a sold-out audience at the Bridgewater Hall, Manchester's international concert venue. It was a concert celebrating the Silver Jubilee of the city's tram system, which was a game-changer in connecting the city and its suburbs, helping shape Manchester into the bustling hub it is today.
Now, in 2017, the Metrolink system celebrated 25 years, and to commemorate that event, every stop on the system, I believe at the time there was 93, was allocated to a group or an artist to write a song or a tune or a piece of music about that stop. Streetwise Opera got Piccadilly, and on a wonderful sunny afternoon in August, we all came and performed performances in here. As you can imagine, 93 performances was long. School kids, pensioners, weird and wonderful. And it was sold out, and I thought if I can do that, I can do anything.
Manchester definitely has a wonderful way of celebrating both its strengths and its weaknesses, something we admire. When we travel, we are most interested in the raw culture of a place, its people and its history. And we really enjoyed the way Andy's talk was full of unfiltered, authentic experiences that reflect the daily lives of the city's people, especially those on the margins. His tour was both messy and imperfect, reflecting the true soul of Manchester itself, a celebration of everyday hustle, resilience and grit.
In April the 23rd, 2018, Streetwise Opera were privileged to perform at the opening presentation ceremony of the Jesus the Homeless statue, presented to Manchester by Canadian artist Timothy Smaltz. I believe originally it was offered to London, but London turned it down. Something to do with not wanting to promote homelessness, which is very charitable of them. So we got it instead, so thank you, London. It was the first one in Britain at the time. Now it's meant to look like this to resemble a homeless person. The only way you can tell is Jesus is by the holes on his feet. Behind here there is deliberate graffiti, a loaf that says Mary loves Joe. So it's a special place of his mum and dad's, which is quite sweet. I believe they're still trying to get one in London, but they're still battling. I just think just leave them. Don't give them any credit. Now, before lockdown, it used to host the memorial service for people who died on the streets, where all the names of people who died on the streets are read out. But again, that's not been happening. And it's something else what could do with starting up again, to be honest. But in last year, I believe there were 79 people who died on the streets in Greater Manchester. It's pretty shocking, really, in this day and age, when you see all the empty buildings as well. But it's all health and safety, puts a spoiler on it, you need running water and you need this and the other. And some people are just happy to have somewhere to keep dry and safe, but what can you do? It's probably a mixture of all sorts, really. I mean, they're not getting the health that service what they need, and some people get assaulted and killed, and some people just die in the cold. You can see why people will go to prison. And there's a cycle where they'll throw you out, they'll put you in prison for X amount of months and then throw you back out onto the streets. And as soon as the weather goes cold, they'll smash a window in out, they break the probate and they just go straight back in. And you can see why, but then you can't promote giving people a house if they've been in prison either. So it's hard, people make it hard. My main priority has got to be obviously paying me rent. And then everything else from there is a bonus.
His priority on keeping a roof over his head felt even more poignant and personal when he took us to Little Island, the site of a tragedy inflicted upon people with a little that could have been prevented by people who have a lot. Manchester's Little Island formed in the early 1820s as Irish immigrants fled the economic hardships and social unrest in Ireland to seek work in Manchester's mills and factories. Once again, Andy has done his research, and there is a lot to take in.
And I've got to read my notes on this one because there's a lot, and if I don't, I'll forget.
For anyone struggling with the accent like me, I recommend clicking on the subtitles now.
Now, originally it was known as Little Island. The houses lay so low that only the chimneys of three-storied houses could be seen from Oxford Road. They lived in a handful of streets which became so infamous that they were recorded in literature at the time and spurred massive social change. Forced into poor living conditions due to being offered cheap unskilled work, one or more families would live in a room or a cellar, and by 1835 it's estimated that 15,000 people were living in 3,500 cellar dwellings. Wakefield Street had the most overcrowded house. Number 1 was home to 15 people from 3 different families. Here would be choked with smoke and smog, and the average life expectancy of a gentleman at this time was 38 and a labourer was just 17.
Wow.
William Street was the smallest street, but was built alongside the river, the waters of which were described as black as ink. The Medlock flooded often, and these houses were the first to suffer. And during the floods of 1847, all the residences and all the streets were submerged under 4.5 foot of water. After that, there was a huge cholera outbreak, which killed over 200 people. They found the body of a 5-year-old boy in his mother's arms. The woman had been beaten beyond recognition by the man she was living with. They never found him, he vanished, and they never found who he was. And just after the cholera outbreak, a guy called James K. Shuttleworth visited, and he described the living conditions thus. The district is frequently the haunt of hordes of thieves and desperadoes who defied the law, and is always inhabited by a class resembling savages in their appetites and habits. He noted with disgust that whole families slept in the same room together, sometimes with a pig or other animals as well. The cellars consist of 2 rooms on a floor, each 9 to 10 foot square, some inhabited by 10 people, many others by more. The people have no beds, keep each other warm by close stowage on shavings or straw. A change of clothes or linen is a rare exception. Many of the back rooms where they sleep have no other means of ventilation from the front rooms. And some of the cellars have been filled up, deemed as uninhabitable. Bourne is now occupied by a weaver who has blocked the drains with clay and mops up the water every morning. Now in 1844, German industrialist Friedrich Engels was visiting Manchester with his companion and lover, a young Irish woman named Mary Burns, who showed him the less desirable parts of Manchester. He was also signing the Communist Manifesto at Chetham's Library with Karl Marx. So communism was formed in Manchester. He describes Little Ireland in his 1845 work, The Condition of the Working Class in England. The cottages are old, dirty and of the smallest sort. The streets are uneven, falling into ruts and in parts without drains or pavements. Masses of refuse, offal and sickening filth lie among the standing water in all directions. The atmosphere is poisoned by the effluvia of these, laden and darkened by the smoke of a dozen tall chimneys. A horde of ragged women and children swarm about here as filthy as the swine that live upon the garbage heaps and puddles. The race that live in those ruinous cottages or indeed in dark wet cellars in measureless filth and stench must really have reached the lowest stage of humanity. Now 1849 saw the arrival of Oxford Road Railway Station, which signalled the end for Little Ireland. It cut Little Ireland in 2, it rendered everyone homeless. So in compensation, they stole fittings from the houses they were being thrown out of, including staircases. We know what they did with them.
But when the city saw its people had reached the lowest stage of humanity, it did not leave them there. In the wake of the tragic conditions in Little Ireland, Manchester became a focal point for social reform movements in the 19th century. Public activism led to health reforms, better housing standards, and early labour rights as the city came out in support of its poorest residents. But as we had quickly learned, life in Manchester is turbulent and tangled, so there was one more pub to see to finish off the story of Little Ireland.
The Salisbury. Originally it was called the Tullamagorum Vaults. The landlord was Scottish and he got so annoyed with the Irish coming in causing trouble and named it after his favourite Scottish dance song. Odd solution. At some point we can't fathom, the staff don't know, it changed its name to the Salisbury to commemorate the Marquis of Salisbury, thank you, who celebrated 3 terms as Prime Minister, not consecutively. He's a very odd character to name a pub after, or anything. What his connection to Manchester is, I don't know. It was something to do with the Great Western Railway. He was an extreme racist, he was very pro-slavery. He also spoke up against women getting the vote. He spoke in front of 100,000 people in Manchester and caused a riot. So people can't understand why it's named the Salisbury, but it just is. This is a row survivor from Little Ireland. This is the top of Wakefield Street, and the buildings at the back of the houses people lived in, so you can see the size and condition. Yeah. I'm assuming the cellars are used for storage these days, but one never knows.
If anyone did know, we're sure it would be Andy. His tour included a lot more than what we've shown you here. We've had to edit it to fit the YouTube-friendly format. If you'd like a full recording, join us on Patreon, link below. But for now, we want to leave you wanting more, to encourage you to join the tour for yourself. We definitely recommend it. Not only is it a fabulous way to get to know Manchester, it's an experience that leaves you feeling like your tourism money is going to a good cause, which brings us on to our social tourism review of Invisible Cities. Just a reminder at this point, we don't receive any payment for our reviews. If you'd like to find out more about the criteria that we use for our social tourism reviews, check out the video above.
Social good. We're popping up a full gold for every point on the social good star straight away. Andy most definitely helped us build a positive bond with the city by presenting it in its harsh reality and connecting us with stories that wouldn't normally be told. He instantly created a connection with us, not only by sharing his personal story, but by bringing to life the human story of the history he was sharing. It made me want to go back to my home city and find out more about it and about the invisible people there. Andy was open to all our curious questions, and we were extremely grateful for and admiring of his genuine openness. The entire Invisible Cities program is designed to support those experiencing homelessness and underrepresented population group with lesser known stories to tell. To support their mission, tourists can gift tours to others or contribute to their free community group tours. Or you could even consider starting up an Invisible Cities group in your own city.
Treasury. 100% of the profit from Invisible Cities goes towards the development and training of their guides and to raise awareness of the social issues that they face in their cities. Their training programs are designed on a one-to-one basis so that each person is supported to achieve their own goals. Part of the Invisible Cities profit is also used to support personal projects like further education or reuniting with family and friends. Andy told us a little bit about how Invisible Cities has supported him.
I've surprised myself, to be honest, with this. I just never thought I'd be able to do anything like this, but I just find it quite relaxing. I suppose it's not for everybody, but it's all about everybody's own experiences. So everybody's tours are all completely different. And it's same in Cardiff, and it's same in Glasgow, and it's same in York. It's all about our own. I don't think I've been able to do anything else if I hadn't done this. Yeah, we've all been on each other's.
Okay,
Because obviously when I first started, we had our original tour guide Danny, who's no longer with us sadly, and Laura, and I went on theirs just to get the feeling of what it was like. You're not under any obligation, and it's all in your own time. And that was a good thing about Back on Track. You weren't put under any pressure, and you got a certificate at everything. Sometimes because I was getting put under so much pressure with the work programme and the job centre, how hard it was to be in that environment where you're not put under any pressure, and you can just do what you want. And because of that, I just thought, well, I was ready. And there was only myself holding myself back, and they kept saying, well, you've got to do it once. And I did it with a group of friends, people from Streetwise and people I knew from the museum. And I thought, if I don't start, I'm never going to do it. There's only me stopping, and you've just got to have a go.
Accessibility. The tours delivered by Invisible Cities take you on a unique route in each city, but most of them are wheelchair accessible. They strive to adapt their tours to the needs of their guests, so when booking your spot, you'll need to make your requirements clear. Andy's tour didn't use a microphone, and the noise of the city was undeniably problematic. So those with hearing needs might want to make sure they think this through and let him know in advance. We are sure he is someone who will find a way to make it work for you.
All of Invisible Cities tours take place in the top 10 of the UK's most LGBT-friendly cities. The Rainbow Cities Index analyses factors like work opportunities, community and social scene, safety and tolerance, and dating life to find the most LGBT-friendly cities. Manchester came in third after London and Brighton. The social perspective presented on this tour was Andy's own and is inclusive or exclusive as fits his thoughts on the experiences he has had. As mentioned before, we thought his take on history was wonderfully personal and touching, and I really enjoyed learning about the under-celebrated women who have helped shape the city's history.
Relationships. Andy's tour was most definitely fun. We thoroughly enjoyed our time with him. He had more than enough information for us to digest, and the tone and quality of his service were perfect for us. We were instantly comfortable talking to Andy because of his down-to-earth manner. We thought the tour was value for money, and we gave him a tip, which was much deserved.
We did note that the description of the tour mentioned a discussion about the link between alcoholism and homelessness, which Andy didn't really go into any depth in on the day. We didn't mind at all. We got more than promised with all the history he had researched and shared, but we have mentioned this to Invisible Cities just to be transparent, and our recommendation was that the description be updated to match Andy's tour just as it is.
Sustainability. Invisible Cities didn't have any specific mention of sustainability goals on their website, but the tour Andy took us on was fully walkable and accessible via Manchester's expansive public transport system. Invisible Cities has teamed up with Train Split, who cover the cost of the train travel for Invisible City guides and staff. A great initiative. As you walk through the city centre and neighbourhoods, there are clearly marked bins for separating recyclables from general waste, making it easier for residents and visitors to recycle.
Manchester City has made significant commitments to reducing its environmental impact and promoting sustainability as part of its vision to become a greener, more sustainable urban centre. To be honest, on the day we could see there was still a lot of work to be done. But of course every city has this challenge on its hands, and we appreciate the mammoth effort we all must make in this area. So overall, our final thoughts on Andy's tour of Manchester? Well, I absolutely loved it. He brought a realness and a rawness that took it beyond the shiny famous buildings and statues. He really showed us the grittier side of Manchester that we wouldn't have seen on our own.
I agree. Andy's perspective gave us an authentic taste of Manchester, making this tour stand out from the rest. So a big thank you to Zakia for coming up with such a brainchild idea. We wish her even more success as she spreads the mission further. Personally, I'd love to do another Invisible Cities tour, and I'd love to see them branch out over the world.
Me too. And we hope that you'll join us there. So hit subscribe and the notifications bell so that you can come along too. Until then,
Happy travels, everyone.